Good evening and welcome to On the Spot. Our guest for this evening is political activist and super producer. You know him as Brother Mtume of 98.7 Kiss FM Open Line. Welcome, my brother.
Brother, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
Okay, we gonna start it off with our first subject. The 2006 election is over. What's your analysis on it?
What's the song? We've only just begun. I think a lot of us need to just hold off before we do the celebrating and the jumping up and down. I don't think it's so much a question of the Democrats winning as much as it is the Republicans, based on a critical mass of the corruption and the arrogance and the Iraq War. They imploded. And I'm not sure if this is the Democratic Party that's in. We got to be clear. These are a lot of moderate Democrats that have been elected, that were chosen by Rahm Emanuel, who's like the Karl Rove of the Democratic Party.
All right.
So it remains to be seen what they're going, like I said, what they're going to do for us. I don't think as many black people who are supposed to chair these committees are going to get those gigs. Alcide Hastings, I don't think will. And there's a question about John Conyers.
The CBC.
The what?
Congressional Black Caucus.
Caucus. But John Conyers, I think you saw the neocons start to go after him once he started talking about possibly having, not possibly, did have some hearings on impossible impeachment.
The Downing Street memo.
Right.
Okay.
So, we'll see what happens with that.
So I think he'll make it. They got a little power. You don't think they have power with the caucus up in there?
Well, I remember one of the last times we were together, we were speaking at an event, and I think what I said then really is apropos here. One has to make the distinction between influence and power. Influence is one's ability to affect change. Power is the ability to make the change. There's no power from black elected officials in Congress. It's influence and their sphere of influence. And I don't think that Pelosi and the Democratic Party that's moving more and more to the center will allow that many black people to run these very important committees. I just don't see it.
They have a lot of numbers. How can they not influence power?
The numbers in terms of, you talking about how long they've been there?
Of course.
Seniority is not the only qualification
of course.
To head a committee. And that's what they're going to use about Congressman Hastings. So that's not going to be the only formula that they derive this from.
Well, we have one of our congressmen in New York City, in Harlem, Charlie Rangel, the new head man of New York City.
I don't think there's any way they can get around him. I mean, brother has been in line for that position for a long time, and he gets along well. Okay. Conyers is a different story.
He's considered a rebel, but what do you mean he gets along well? Is that borderline company?
You can define that as you will, but I mean, he's not. I don't think he's looked at in any way, shape, or form the same way Brother Conyers is in terms of how the neocons and right wing view him as a threat.
So we don't think that Charlie's going to rock any boats, is what you said?
Well, what did Malcolm say? Time will tell.
Okay. Well, how did that affect us here in New York City, this election? What do you see for our city?
Well, the one thing I don't want us to suffer from as a people is what I call the illusion of inclusion. I don't know how much this is going to open. Again, we're talking about something that, as it evolves, we will see. My only concern is how it affects us. You know what I mean?
Of course,
you got to talk to other people about how it affects their community. It's our community, and I've always been very suspicious and always felt a little down about the fact that we are so unconditionally committed to the Democratic Party. And when you see one group voting 90%, we've been taken for granted. And I'm not sure they have room for us in that house. A few jobs here and a few committees there. But the point is, we get them over every time. As a matter of fact, Brother Norman, I was thinking that had an analogy one day, it hit me. What black people do, we're like, those cars that the ones you got to push sometimes, the stick,
okay,
and you can what they call pop the clutch.
Mm-hmm.
Black people are the clutch poppers for the Democratic Party. When they need a push, they know they got us. But once the car gets started, they drive off. But you know what we do? We go on the sideline and sit for 4 years later so they can come around for the next pop for the clutch. We not getting in the car. We need to. My point being, we need to be in all parties. My real position is we need another third party in this country, period, for everybody.
Well, let's start with Hillary Clinton.
Who?
Our senator.
Yeah, right.
Our senator.
Have you seen her? Right.
But we be looking for. We want to talk about her
Right.
since she hasn't came on any of the shows, and when she first was running, she was on Hot 97.
Mm-hmm.
She came out to your show, 98.7 Kiss FM, morning show, evening show. Matter of fact, more than once. Am I correct?
No, she came once, and it was not on her own volition. She was coming on to support a bill that another a congressperson, I'm not sure, I think it was Meeks was doing, and she came in support. I have challenged her since she's been in the Senate to come on and talk to black people direct. But you know, there's another thing that happens for us. White politicians only feel that they have to go to a black church, kiss a few black babies, and take some photo ops with black preachers. They very seldom come and address black people in a media situation. Also, given the fact we don't have that many media situations. Open line and we can review is a special thing. That's why what you're doing, brother, is so important. We need as many outlets as possible.
Well, I tell you, dealing with the media, I find political people in our community, when we're out there at City Hall, there's nobody of color on any shows. We've filmed a lot of times when our political leaders is here. There's nobody of color. There's not one show. We're out there by ourselves.
That's right, brother.
We filmed some things for the Congress race, the 10th district, 11th district, and I couldn't find a show out here of color.
It's unbelievable, brother.
There was no media. Where is black media?
Right. Well, we've been basically written off, even in terms of being commentators. Have you noticed in all those major talk shows and MSNBC, CNN, Fox, I don't care who it is, there's not one black or Latino host of any talk show. Now, you can be on the morning show when you're joking around about cooking and selling used cars or whatever they do, but serious political dialogue, not one black, Latino, or Asian talk show host on any major cable station.
Why is that?
We're excluded. We're excluded from the conversation.
Well,
we've moved from integration to disintegration.
But how do we get excluded?
Because we don't own nothing. It gets to that. What makes your thing work? You own this.
Yeah, I own this.
Look. The reality is, brother, I've been doing the open line for 12 years now. Tomorrow we can get a call. That's over.
And what do we have?
Well, you might have whatever. Russian polka music. I don't know. The bottom line is we lost ownership. And that happened in 1996. That's when it was initiated with the Federal Communications Act. Bill Clinton did. And all the members of the Congressional Black Caucus.
Signed off?
Caucus, I'm sorry. Did I say caucus? Signed it. And what that did, it opened the door for major companies like Clear Channel, who could now have more than one station in a city. Before, they used to be limited. And all of a sudden, these companies went from maybe 500-600 stations to over 1,000, 1,500 stations. And I'm gonna say something, give you an example, brother. And this ain't third party. I was there. Reverend Sharpton, myself, Don King, Cutman, Charles Etheridge, and it was another brother from Telemundo. Clear Channel had to sell off, this was about 4 years ago, maybe 5, 123 stations. This is a fact. The FCC said you got too many, and a certain amount has to be owned by minorities. We went down there, met with the chairman of Clear Channel, the chairman. Now remind you, he has to sell 123. Don King opened up a letter of credit for $4 billion. I almost fell out the chair, from Wall Street.
Don King?
Don King said, this group of us wants to, how many stations can we buy? Now look at me, brother. I ain't saying I heard, I was sitting at the table. See, people have to understand, most of these stations now cost $150 million, $125 million. So with $4 billion, you would think we would walk away with something.
Yeah.
Well, I'm still waiting. Tick, tick, tick. We didn't get one station.
Why is that?
Because we were talking about the building, having enough stations to begin to build a black talk network, like everybody else has 24/7.
So let's ask this question: why we can't start with something small? There's small. small cable networks out here that can be bought. Why we can't start?
No. I'm not saying we can't. I mean, that may be the route. What you're doing may be pioneering a route. But I'm just saying where we started. You would figure if there's houses for sale, if somebody says, okay, no, you got to sell 123 of these houses, and somebody comes along and said, look, here's X amount of money. You don't even have to deal with a mortgage.
And how much did Don have?
$4 billion letter of credit.
And we didn't.
We haven't gotten one station because they knew we wasn't going to do song and dance. We wanted to use that to begin to build a national black talk radio syndicate. Now, Kathy Hughes has since started that with her black talk show network, but we were talking about it back then.
And now we have nothing. Well, we have to start off by just buying little spots on regular cable shows till we get to another level. Right. Now, our next subject we need to talk about is black leadership, or the lack of black leadership.
I think that's probably a more appropriate question. We got a lot of leaders and very little leadership, and I think that one of the reasons we find ourselves in that position, in that posture, is that all our organizations, there's two things that we have to begin to re-examine. Number one, why all organizations are headed by charismatic-based leadership. What happens when that happens, from Marcus Garvey to Martin Luther King to Malcolm X, Congressman Adam Clayton Powell, all the way down the line. When that leader fades or goes away for whatever reason, Huey Newton, Kwame Ture, that movement usually falls apart. Ron Karenga. And
hold on, brother. Give it a minute. We'll be right back after a brief commercial. We're going to
we got to pay the piper.
We'll be right back after this message from our sponsors. And we're back again and on the spot with the legendary brother James Mtume of 98.7 Kiss FM. And the subject is leadership.
Yes, sir. I think just before we went to break, I was saying some of the pitfalls of charismatic leadership or charismatic-based leadership that has always been the fulcrum of most of the organizations that we've dealt with in terms of the political landscape for black people. I mean, you can go back to Marcus Garvey, as I said, all the way through. The problem with that is that it usually falls on the shoulders of those who can rally the masses best, who's the best speaker, the best orator. And we've got to move past that and substitute that with what I call organizational leadership.
Okay.
The other thing about charismatic-based leadership, there's no check and balance. It's like, how do you tell Jesse he's got to leave the Rainbow Coalition, or I mean.
But it's time for a lot of them to leave.
But the thing is, because charismatic leadership is usually beyond check and balances, and therefore, if that leader is no longer appropriate for that time, you still can't remove him. And I always say, even in American politics, every 4 years you vote for a new person. But it's the presidency that you're really talking about. Every 4 years there's a new president, different personality. But the check and balance is if they go nuts or no longer functional, you can impeach them.
Exactly.
You can't impeach charismatic-based leadership, and because we've not had check and balances, a lot of things have gone awry. And I think at this point, black people, for many black people, especially for my generation, there's been a frustration and a resignation because there's been a lot of disappointment.
But for my generation, this is my problem. For my generation, breaking into leadership, for example, I want to get out there and be heard and lead some people in a different direction. Right. But we have older leadership that has been in power for a very long time. Right. But why in our community do they tell us we have leaders? But in other communities, there's no leaders. I mean, in the white community.
Yeah.
They don't say who's a leader. They just let somebody
speak.
Just
lead.
They
just
but
lead.
They say, well, we got to come to this leader in the black community. We got to go to this church, and we only talk to certain people. When Giuliani was in office, he only talked to certain black leaders.
Usually preachers, which is another part of that syndrome we were talking. We're the only ethnic community in this country whose political leaders, for the most part, are also their religious leaders. Nobody else does that.
Not the Catholic Church.
And as a result, and we understand the history, that history is predicated on our experiences, in slavery, post-slavery. Coming out, the preacher was the one person that the white community coordinated how they were going to deal with the black community. Okay, so the preacher, and also he was the first one that didn't have to have a job. Okay, the congregation supported him, and that was never more evident than the civil rights movement. Now, there's nothing wrong with that. The only thing wrong with that, when that's your only frame of reference for leadership, going back to what you said, white folks don't have to have no charismatic leader. We're not charismatic about Giuliani, but it's understanding organizational leadership, not one person.
What is our lack of leadership, and where do we go?
Our lack of leadership, Norman, is very simple. Simply is this: we don't have enough young people, and I get so sick and tired of the excuses that my generation constantly throws out. If we don't birth new leadership, then what are we doing? We don't provide new leaders. I mean, there's no way to incubate new leaders, because my generation, to be quite frank, has become very selfish.
But they're not including them. Yeah. I mean, if you go out to some of these functions that they're calling out people for, if you really try to talk to these leaders,
come on, man.
If you talk to me, we got a lot of arrogance in our community that needs to be talked about.
Right.
If you reach out to certain one of these certain few leaders, so-called leaders, try to talk to them off camera and see their attitude.
Yeah, there's another thing. Matter of fact, you and I had spoken on this before. They keep talking about like the hip hop generation, young youth. You're talking about people 30, 35. That ain't youth.
No.
Okay? Youth is 12, 13, 15. But that's, again, what I'm saying is that also demonstrate the lack of connection.
Yeah.
Okay? And what it gets down to is this, brother. A lot of people don't want to leave the stage. Remember, part of this
but
is
now
entertainment.
you talk to quite a few of these people in power. And what's the story? Because I know the subject come up. Of course, you don't like it yourself. So the story comes up. And when the story comes up, for the people that don't want to leave the stage, what is their excuse for it?
You got to snatch. Young people have to snatch the torch. Ain't nobody giving them nothing.
I did tell you at the bottom of my stage down here.
Right,
the torch on one side and the hands on the other. We just have to take it.
See, and young people, the younger generation has to understand that's not going to be surrendered. And especially in the political arena of elected office. I mean, you've got mayors that have been in office for 20-something years, didn't groom anybody. And so when they leave office, there's no footprint, there's no blueprint, there's no architecture. And that's the thing that has hurt us most. It's the division between older blacks and younger blacks. In particular, older black men.
I spoke to a few city council people, Charles Barron. We have about 30
come on, Barron is.
We have about 30-something seats.
That's my man.
Coming up in 2009.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very good job. But when are we going to groom these leaders? Because right now that job is paying $100 and change, about $112,000.
Mm-hmm.
And when do we groom some young people to come in here? Because the people that's in office got to go. Simple as that. And there's a lot of seats out here. And what are our leaders doing?
Well, like I said, brother, I'm 60. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
I've done all. I mean, there's no such thing. Let me rephrase. All I can do. There's no one size fits all. We all got to contribute where and how we can. But the best message I can give to young people is you got to break the door down. Literally break the door down. But also you have to study and be prepared.
Okay.
See, just having attitude is not a substitute for preparation.
Okay.
You know what I mean? I hear a lot of the attitude, man, we're going to do. No, you got to prepare. You got to study, you got to read, and you have to think.
Mm-hmm.
Analytical thought.
But if we can connect with the older groups here, the older activists and everybody else, we could be all right.
Mm-hmm.
But if you don't want to train, if you don't want to start nothing, that's your problem. So with that in mind, I will lead you to this way. Our women, the state of our women. And that's a very important part of our community, is to get our women active in my line of work, that they're not active and don't really want to be. What are we going to do?
Well,
We talked about it before.
I don't know if I don't know so much if it's the fact of women not being active, because the history of our struggle in America, women have always led the way. But the bottom line, I'm going back in order to lead forward.
Okay.
Bottom line is, man, Harriet Tubman was leading the Underground Railroad, not Joe Johnson. Okay, in the Montgomery bus situation, who was it that didn't give up a seat?
Rosa.
It was a woman, not Billy Jackson. So the history of women carrying the struggle, especially now, and throughout the history of the black church, has been monumental. And I really feel that there's been an abdication of responsibility from black men. I have a different position. You know, and if we talk about younger women leading up to now, I think one of the things that we've done, or not concentrated on as much as we should, the last few years we've spent so much time talking about the endangered black male that we haven't talked about the endangered black female, what it is for them to grow up without fathers in the household.
Who's going to teach the boy how to be a man, but someone has to be there for that girl.
That's what I'm saying.
But now, brother, we've talked about this here before.
I'm going to join you. But.
And you said you wanted to get something done where we can get the women involved.
We were talking about the work wanted to get. I'm going to get involved with Brother DeLacy Davis, with the young female gangs, which is another thing. Young women of color, specifically black and Latino, are going to prisons in an unbelievable at an unbelievable rate, way past the males. And that's something we have to look at. And what do they bring when they come out? So they're locking up black and Latino women at a faster rate than they are black men. So, and the gangs are proliferating at a much faster rate.
Where does that leave the children?
Well, we got to deal with the mothers who are creating them. We talking about 15, 16-year-old kids that have 2 or 3 kids. Okay. So we got to deal with that. But the gang culture among black and Latino young girls, it's got to be dealt with. But we don't talk about that. We have limited our conversation way too much to the effect it has had on young black men and Latino. We need to deal with the effect it's had on young women.
And it's safe to say that has pushed the crime levels.
Yeah, bro.
And although the numbers, police say the numbers are down, we feel effect in the community. The older people feel it in the housing development.
Oh, come on.
My producer was very upset. He saw some brothers smoking blunts and urinating in a building. I'm telling you something, I'm very tired of, if you ever go into any of these stores out here, you see a whole variety of blunts. They have every flavor humanly possible. And I've reached out to the NAACP and asked them, well, what can they do to, let's make it an issue here. We can get some of the legal team out here and find out why they unfairly targeting our community.
But, those points you're making are very important. But the bottom line, if that fire and that resistance doesn't come from the people themselves.
Well, the people are tired. You got a lot of brothers, I'm going to tell you something now, that are tired of the music that they hear, the cursing and the disrespect of women in the music. So there's brothers and sisters that's out here that are tired. They're tired of the N-word. They're out here and they want to do something. But when you go to that leadership again, if they don't take the bull by the horn, then what's going to happen?
Again, that's why, like I said, brother, there's no one size fits all. We all got a space. That's why what you're doing here is very important. Reaching the audience of younger people that can take that torch.
Well, I'm definitely trying to bridge the gap here, and it's very important as we get out here, I'll get our message out here and bring the older activists out here to monitor what we're doing and mentor us at the same time. And I'm reaching out, and I've always have reached out. In this next segment, after we take a commercial break, we'll discuss how I got to this role and the big impact you've had in my life. So we'll be right back after a brief message from our sponsors. We're back here with our guest, Brother James Mtume, the legendary one from Kiss FM. The impact of Hurricane Katrina.
The impact for me, brother,
Impact.
was this. It was the first time I had to look in not the first time I had to look in my own mirror, but a collective mirror. While everybody was screaming about George Bush, he ain't doing nothing in it. My whole thing is, if you know it's a snake and you bring it in the house and it bites you, what are you complaining about? You knew it was a snake before you brought it in. So let's move George Bush and FEMA, feeble, whatever you want to call that out.
All right.
I don't care what white folks didn't do, government officials. What I had to deal with in the mirror, and myself included, collective us, what did we do? It was the strangest feeling I had. It's like we were all watching this like it was a reality TV show. But it was real. And we're watching black people dying, holding signs up, starving at an arena, babies dying, and we sitting there watching it. And then it hit me. We got a lot of rich black people. How come we couldn't have leased, well, some of them even got their own helicopters. Yeah. How come we couldn't fly over and drop water to help and food for our own people? We're going to complain about Bush. No, I know where you're going, and I want you to go there. But the point was, what does that say about us? If white people don't save you, you're not to be saved. And that's where it hit me. Where are we at this point? We don't move unless a Bush moves. We allowed it to happen, and we didn't do nothing.
And a year and change later, our elected officials of color, what plan have we gotten since then? And so this won't happen. Another hurricane, but any other major disaster in our community.
Well, you know what? The irony is, you just said, brother, a year later, irony is it could happen again.
And if
the levees ain't been fixed. They just put a Band-Aid on it.
Okay, but we do have a great deal of elected officials.
Yeah.
Highest at any point now.
Well, remember we talked about in the beginning the distinction between influence and power.
But
they don't have no power.
We don't have a plan.
No, brother. Did it look like we had a plan?
Okay, we don't have a plan again. So you mean to tell me it can happen again?
Brother, if we blink too hard, it may happen again. But here's another point I wanted to make that's important. I mean, piggybacking off that. I received a call from Minister Farrakhan asking me would I be part of a delegation, which I was very honored to immediately say yes, to go to Cuba.
Okay.
And the main impetus, although we met with the heads of all the ministries and had a 3-hour meeting, 4 of us did, 5 of us did, with Fidel Castro.
All right.
Minister Farrakhan was so unnerved and so despondent about the response. He said, okay, well, we can't sit here. Let's go somewhere where a year before that, a lot of people don't know this, Cuba had a Category 5 hurricane, at which point they moved 1.3 million people from one side of the island to the other. They didn't suffer one death.
Not one?
Not one. 1.3 million. So we went to the disaster relief, the head of the disaster relief, and we saw how they did it. It gets back to that word organization. They have it structured so they know in every house who lives there and if that person is indigent in any way or requires a wheelchair. So when that move happens, they know who to get and where to move them. So how could a little island like Cuba move 1.3 million and not lose one life? When we have a hurricane and lose thousands, and to this day I do not believe for 1 minute only a few thousand people died.
Well, we're still finding them.
Still finding them.
We're still finding them.
Still finding them. So, like I said, brother, there is no plan. The only plan is now is the plan that the government people and business has to now make New Orleans a star-studded example of when they decide to rebuild it. Because remember, those people aren't coming back. It's the only time in my life I've ever seen people flown away from a situation. And they're almost like Palestinian refugees. There's no right of return to come back to New Orleans.
Children and families are still
broken up, with no plan to bring them back.
Trailers still in the parking lot.
Yeah.
Trailers still in the parking lot. And again, our leadership has failed us. and we still don't have a plan.
No, brother.
So is it safe to say it can happen again?
It probably will, even if it's not in the form of a hurricane.
So what was Castro able to show you?
Well, first of all, we not only, I mean, we have the discussion, we went to the ministries and they showed us footage. There's a documentary that the minister is coming out with in the Nation of Islam that we're putting together now that encompasses all the aspects of our trip and actually shows you how they move people, because it's people oriented. Just like, medicine is free.
Cuba.
Oh, yeah. Education is free.
Okay.
They have a literacy. You know what the dropout rate
Did you have any
in high school is in Cuba?
What's that?
3%.
Did you have any elected officials that bring back something to say, regardless of what, this is working?
Well, see, it takes a lot of, and I'm talking about this trip on your cable show, but there's people watching and listening who are not necessarily our friends. But it's incumbent upon me or anybody with any kind of backbone to say what they saw. It's one thing to hear what the media says, and it's another to actually go there. And I was overwhelmed with how much the people are watched out for. In terms, like I said, medicine. All healthcare is free. All education is free. But when they want to paint someone as a demon, that's what the media does. But Cuba is a place that people, I think, should go to see how that works. And a man who survived for 47 years.
Yeah, and you've had a lot of elected officials on your show and everybody else. And what's the feedback, whether private? Sometimes it might be private because on there they can't say. What are they saying about your trip?
They would love to go on. They would love to sit with Fidel Castro, but they're afraid because you have a government, especially this government, that has been just so bloodthirsty and has pursued his demise. Even today, we were talking about it in the car. Every other day now, I mean, Castro's dying. It's like they're ready to have a carnival, and that's because of the pressure they receive. And it's an outdated thing now from the Miami Cubans, who there's another aspect of this. Those are white Cubans. Mm-hmm. See, a lot of people don't know. One of the things I found out, brother, which was astonishing, is that black Cubans back in the 40s and 30s and the 50s could not walk in Havana after 6 o'clock unless they had cards or showed like working musicians. Okay. They had to have passes. And if you notice, in Miami, that's white Cubans. You see very few black Cubans participating in that, because even though, as Fidel said, it's still a work in progress for integration, but he has put more black Cubans in positions of power than anybody else. And that's a very important part. And next time you see a protest against him, look in that audience and see how many black Cubans there are.
So it's safe to say that the black Cubans support what Castro's doing.
Oh, yeah.
And it's just a certain...
Look what happens that was evident when he came here in 59, right after the revolution, and stayed up. Where'd he go? He didn't go down to the hotels in downtown Manhattan. He stayed at the Teresa Hotel in Harlem. Mm-hmm. He didn't stay at the Waldorf.
Wasn't he here a few years ago?
Yeah, he was here a few years ago, again in Harlem, and spoke.
Okay.
And when he speaks and you see him there, you overwhelmingly, the audience is the black Cubans. Like I said, just take a litmus test. The next time you see them showing those, and I'm sure they'll be out there with their signs and everything, hoping for his death. See how many black Cubans you see there.
When will we be able to reach out and get the footage of what you're...
Well, we're working on it now. The minister is it's a massive task because we were there for almost 2 weeks. And we visited all the ministries. I mean, so we're having everything translated because all the conversations were, was in Spanish, and we had a translator from the Cuban ministry. But everything's going to be put together, and it'll be presented to all the black organizations that wish to have it. I'm looking maybe 3 or 4 months, hopefully.
Okay. Where do we go from here as a community? How do we get there? How do we start?
Brother,
if our leadership is lagging, direct the people. Give us your take on the direction.
I think the first hurdle we've got to get over is the gap between the old and the young. Let's take it out of the context of leadership. Just talking about our community, period. I think the older generation has got to stop talking down to the younger generation and start talking with them. And I think in many ways the younger generation is going to have to at some point stop substituting attitude for analysis. You understand? It's a lot of attitude. I mean, in many cases, it's because for many of them, that's all they got. But at a certain point, it's got to be analysis. It's got to be study. The biggest question I think we have to deal with is how do we excite the imagination of the younger generation? You mentioned that several times, Brother Norman. How do we excite them to want to be a participant in the political process? I don't mean elected office. I'm just talking about in social movement, in ideological movement, in setting goals to understand that you got to make a distinction between motion and movement. See, there's a lot of motion out here, but it's not a movement.
Let me throw something at you. I think Stephon Marbury started a movement, and I'm hoping that everybody else will piggyback.
Well, go ahead.
With his sneaker collection, clothing line, at discount prices where he could have been like any other athlete, for example.
Right. I think he set an example. For it to be a movement, others have to come in and do whatever they don't have to all do sneakers.
Exactly.
But come into the dialogue, come into the matrix to begin to participate. Because actually, what we're talking about and what Stephon did was a wonderful thing. But the question is a bigger question: what has the contribution been from the entertainment world? And athletes are entertainers also. When you get to music, film, whatever, where are those voices? You know, you have Spike Lee, but that ain't your generation.
Exactly.
But where are those voices?
Well, you know, in the process of asking that, I tell my people here at the show, I'm looking for a photo. For example, that photo with Muhammad Ali, with Jackie Robinson, Bill Russell. A lot of people, younger
Jim Brown,
and Lou Alcindor. A lot of people have never witnessed that picture. They have never seen that.
You know what I'm going to do, brother? And right here on film, so I can't even duck and jive. I can't deny it. I'll help you find that, brother. Yeah. And you know, just give me a couple of days, and I'm sure I can locate. If I can't locate where it is, I can find somebody who can guide you to where it is.
I'm gonna tell you why. The younger generation
has no reference for that.
None. They don't realize that entertainers and athletes back then. Bill Russell, I give so much credit to, because Bill Russell was in Boston, and you was active. The brother was active in Boston. And Boston is a racist place. Yeah. Bill Russell was active.
He's been very active. And what people have to remember, the athlete is, you know, Brian Gumbel did an interesting sign-off the other day, and I saw him. I saw him when he was doing it. And he touched on this point. I guess when you mentioned it, I started thinking about that. And he was absolutely correct. He said, man, athletes are the highest profile people, man, in the world. And where is this generation? But I don't blame them, because the other thing I always say, I can't blame you for not knowing what no one ever told you should know. So that gets back to my generation. But at a certain point, and it's going to be based on brothers like yourself and sisters who do this kind of programming,
I'm gonna tell you
where you can jam that. See, nobody's held to any kind of responsibility to standard.
You know who I'm looking for also?
Who?
Vargas, the boxer. What's his name? Fernando Vargas. Fernando Vargas they did a show, I think when he fought Trinidad. And they talked about Fernando had owned quite a few houses.
Right.
And he was financially set, and he was about 23 years old. And these are the things that has to be spotlighted by our entertainers and athletes. The positive things that someone like Stephon did.
Yeah.
Vargas putting himself in a position where he won't be like Hammer.
And that's what I'm saying. But those are great examples that you use to ask other athletes. See, nothing gets started. There's an old saying, you can't aspire to that which you have no reference for. So if nobody does it, nobody's responsible for what. But once somebody does it, then it's like, okay, he does it. Now, what can you do to match that?
In closing out, this is what I'm going to tell you. Your show inspired me to do this. I've been listening to this show, turned on a lot of white folks, blacks, everybody. Listen to Open Line, Week in Review. Everybody loves Peter Tolerant, Cutman, and everybody else, and Trip. And Call to Arms was something that was been used so much on the show that I've always been inspired and wanted to see who was behind the mic. So you know what I did to reach out to y'all. It It was legendary. I was calling and calling
That's
and everything
right.
else because I wanted to see
Who these
brothers of
peeps
color
were. Who these peeps were.
just dropping it, having an analysis on various topics, politics that we don't see. Analysis, I'm sorry.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very important to me, very important. So now I said I wanted to take, because I always wanted your show to be on TV.
Right.
So I said, being that I can't put, I'm not in control of that.
Yeah, but look,
I can create my own.
Yeah, so here we
so
are.
I said, I'll create my own, and I have to give thanks to Kiss FM, Open Line, Bob Pickett, Slade, everybody,
Mm-hmm.
because they inspired me to do
Brother,
this.
I mean, and I know I speak for all of us, man. I mean, we're extremely proud because remember now, we started talking about this a couple of years ago.
See,
When Bill Stepney
yeah,
had
see,
introduced me
people don't
to you.
actually know. I've told them a couple of times at work. I said, you know what? I was actually in the studio.
That's right.
And I got pictures up there where
That's right.
things was going on and they was filming. I said, but you know, I was actually sitting right there while
That's
they
right,
was
that's
filming.
right.
And I said, after a while, I'm gonna be at that table with the headphones on talking. And I thank you for the inspiration. It means a lot to me. And my family have dealt with all the years of calling home and saying, put the tape on, the show get ready. Come on. Put the tape on, the
Brother,
show get
man,
ready. Come on.
I'm overwhelmed with the work that you're trying to do, man. And again, people do things when they see another doing it, and you don't know who you're touching. See, that's what I always say. You know, it's the progressive perfection.
Exactly.
You were listening to us. You got inspired to do this. When you running this show, brother, you don't know who you're going to touch out there.
You said
Who's
something.
going to do something else?
You said something about being at the Republican convention, and you ran into some people.
Oh, right. I was saying that you never know who you touch. I mean, it's just like with music. You know, people constantly. Well, first, most people don't even know about my musical background, but I come out of jazz and in the contemporary funk and R&B. But I was referring to, you don't know who's listening. I was with at the Republican convention, brother Bob Pickett and myself, and my nephew Kevin, and we were upstairs where all the quote unquote political celebrities were, and I saw Commissioner Kelly was there, and he had two bodyguards with him, two detectives, and one of the brothers saw me and said he had seen me speak or something. He said, "Brother Mtume," I said, "Oh yeah." So you know, we give the hug. You know how I do, and was like, "Boom, boom." I listened to everything. When the brother turned around and walked off, the white detective just looked over at me and said, "Third answer." I said, he said, "Man, I listen to you every Sunday." So again, you don't know. Now he may have been listening for surveillance purposes, but the bottom line is, you never know. You never know, and that's the point, brother. And I want to convey that to you. Take what happened to you. You never know what flowers grow from what seeds. There's some young person out there watching this and says, "You know what? I want to do this, and I want to take it here, because that's how we get there."
Yeah, well,
so I want to thank you, brother, right on camera,
thank you
baby.
For
Thank you, baby.
those who don't know, we built our own.
Yes, sir.
We went from trying to film in Manhattan a few years ago to we built our own studio right here on Nostrand Avenue. If anybody want to come down, we here. And Tunes, I know you're going to be back on the show.
Oh, brother, whenever you need me, brother. And I'll be talking to other people about the show, brother.
Let them know
you ain't going to run out a guest list. You have a guest list, brother.
We're here, and I'd like to thank you for coming out.
I'm honored, man.
And
honored.
I know what it took, and I'm here for you.
And one more again.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
We'd like to close out this segment and close out this evening. We thank everybody for watching on the spot. We hope to see you again next week. Thank you. Have a good night.